Welcome to the Keeping IT Real podcast. This podcast features honest and transparent conversations about what it takes to manage corporate technology and expenses today. Each episode, listen to true and personal stories from IT professionals who are working hard to make sure their business stays connected and competitive. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo, and let's meet our next guest.
Today, I'm joined by Renato Inacio, the Director of IT Operations at Child Mind Institute, an independent national nonprofit that helps children and families that are struggling with mental health and learning disorders. Renato is an experienced IT professional specializing in software development and project management, with a strong background in leading cross-functional teams to deliver innovative technology solutions, ultimately enabling organizations to enhance operational efficiency and drive digital transformation. Renato, thanks for being on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
So, it's the classic first question. How did you get started in IT? How did you fall into this industry?
Sure. Interestingly enough, IT was always a hobby, never a career path for me. So I actually wanted to be a lawyer at one point in life. So because of that, I started working in a law firm just as a law clerk and trying to get there. However, the IT department was made of one person. That person had to go on leave. And I basically stepped up and I said, hey, I can help as much as possible. And obviously one thing led to another. The person came back and my hobby, if you will, become, a little bit of a passion, even though I still wanted to go to law school. A few years after that, one of the lawyers opened up his own firm and he asked if I wanted to be the IT director for the firm and run all of the infrastructure operations. And that's when I basically geared differently towards IT. I guess I could say ever since then, it's history. My passion became my career path and everything just led to where I am today.
So when you came to that juncture of either becoming the director of IT or continuing on your path of being a lawyer, was it an easy choice? Was it especially if you've geared up to go to law for so long, to then change and pivot to something that you weren't even really practicing or studying, it was just kind of a hobby. Was it a weird jump, easy jump, hard jump?
It was an interesting jump, let's put it that way, because, even though I did go to school and I have a minor in, back in the days, used to be called MIS, it was nothing that I wanted to follow that path. So when I started getting my hands on, infrastructure, computers and things of that nature back in the, late 90s, it was one of those things. It was like, okay, do I continue with my passion? And, they say that if you do what you love, it's not actually work. So honestly, it was an interesting but easy decision-making process.
Is that true to you? If you do what you love, you never work? Or have there been times where you're like, wait, doing what I love makes me love it a little less because I now have to do it for money? Or did that never really cross in this situation?
In all honesty, we all have days, right? We all have projects. We all have people that we deal with that makes us sometimes question what you're doing. But I can say the pros and the majority of the time, it is true for me. When I do love what I do and I have, that's when I made that choice. And I have plenty of friends that are lawyers and they are all like, you made the right choice, Wow. So, and it's good. It's one of those things that makes me feel good about not only what I do, but the company that I end up being and some of the other organizations that I've been with, that it really is fulfilling to be in this industry and to be where I am, that I can look back and say, wow, my hobby became my career path.
Yeah. Would you say that it is still a passion to this day? You kind of still love IT and tech like you did when it first became that hobby and passion?
I do, but that is a however coming, because when I first started, things were changing not as a fast pace as it is today in the industry. Obviously, everybody was new to technology. There was a lot more to learn and things were a little bit more on a slower pace, if you will. And I was more hands-on. Right now, I move towards more on the leadership level, which is also something that came easy for me. But the changes that has happened in the industry and in IT itself, it's so fast that you really need to, no matter if you are, starting your career or if you're let's call it mid or end of your career, you still need to keep up with technology. So it's a lot faster. You need to be a lot more into it and up to speed on technology. So I still love what I do. I just need to study more and be more aware than, I guess, when I first started.
That brings up a very interesting point, and I think it's something that has a trend that I've noticed in the conversations I've had, which is it gets faster and faster and faster. So you have to keep up more and more and more. At some point, though, don't we have to say, wait, we literally can't keep up with the pace of... So what does your brain, what do you think about that inevitability of like, wait, what if we get to a point where suddenly we're really far behind the advancements of tech, and we think one solution we buy today, suddenly tomorrow something comes out that is completely better than the decision I made yesterday, and now I'm afraid to make any decision. And so there's almost this analysis paralysis because there's too much. So how do you, I think I asked a lot at once, but how do you navigate that information explosion, I guess, that happened in IT and tech in terms of studying more, prioritizing? It's a big catch-all question. I guess just start from where you want to start and we'll go from there.
Sure. No, I think that's a very good question because that's something that I deal with on a daily basis. And I have been since, from my career. I work on many different fields from legal, fintech, higher ed, and now I'm in nonprofit healthcare. So once you are on a specifically niche, so for me, let's use myself as an example. I'm in leadership, right? So I grew from networking, sysadmin. So I grew because that's what the path that I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the managerial leadership path. So now the way I have to keep up, I need to be aware what's out there. I need to know what's out there to assist and help my organization and other people that I help with. But for that, I need to have people that are smarter than I am. So I hire people that are smarter than I am so they can do the hands-on work and keep up with all of that technology. But at the same time, I need to do my own self-study, my own self-awareness of what's out there, right? I mean, I cannot hire somebody to do a project involving AI if I don't know anything about AI or AI does. I think being able to know what's out there, especially on a surface level, if you're not going too deep into the technical, and surround yourself with people that can actually do the work and be, educated enough to explain to you. So in my position as a director level, explain to the leadership team in a way that they also understand.
So your job is to translate between the specialist who knows it like the back of their hand and the person who doesn't know it at all, which means you need to have enough knowledge to understand what they're saying, but you don't need to know exactly what they know in the details. And so that is kind of the way you scale, right? If it's too fast, you find the right people who can do that for you, and then you just learn what you need. So you become that generalist, right?
100%.
With that being said, though, IT definitely is a part of an organization that doesn't receive as much resources necessarily as any other part of the business. And so like you could say all you want, I would just hire if I need that. But the reality is our industry, our department doesn't get that freedom as much. And so you have to live pretty within your means. And so, ideally you would hire the best people and you would be the translator, but sometimes you have to work not like that. And so how do you balance that part? You want more resources, but you don't have enough.
And Jethro, this is a very good point because you hit the nail on the head because that's exactly right. IT is usually underfunded, but they want things to work. So for that, to bridge that gap, you need to be able to train the people that you have on. You need to have the technical skills. So you have to have the personnel to do that. But again, it goes back to my early stages, which is you have to have people that have the drive and they have the want to do it, because you can provide them with training. You can advance their career technically, and they'll be able to do that. You're 100% correct. I cannot just go out there and hire, an expert in AI, right? I'm going to have to make sure that somebody within the team right now is not only able to learn, but willing to learn and, share the wealth with everybody else. So I'm very fond of training in-house, and I don't like when people say, "Oh, you're training them to leave." I was like, "No, I'm training them to be the best of they can be professionally, as well as assist me internally." Now, if a better opportunity for them comes along that unfortunately I cannot provide, I'm more than welcome to, I'm more than happy to put them for success. And that's just part of the industry. So if you groom the people that are inside and you train them, you're not going to train them to leave. You're going to train them to stay, as opposed to no training and then they go somewhere else because they're getting training somewhere else.
To me, it's as simple as you want the best for your employee. You will give them what they need to succeed and thrive. And if they choose to stay because they feel loved and wanted, amazing. If they choose to leave because there's a better opportunity, amazing, because you gave them the tools and resources and skills they needed to be able to do that. And all you can say as a person is like, I did them right, right? And so it only works in the long run for the better. So I completely agree with you there. You moved, obviously now in a managerial leadership position. IT is still very lean and nimble no matter where you are in IT. What does your day-to-day look like, knowing full well that your day is different from day to day?
No, that's a good question. So yes, from leadership is a lot of meetings. Don't get me wrong, but being in a nonprofit organization and trying to make sure that we have everything up to par in order for the organization to keep moving and doing what they do best. My day-to-day is a lot of coaching. We have to make sure that all the infrastructure is operational. I have a lot of, like I said, I have a lot of meetings because when we dealing with nonprofits, there's a lot of people that want to be alongside, but not everybody is the best partner for you. So from the IT perspective, it's great to have the latest and greatest, but we also have a budget that we have to obey by. So making sure that what's out there is good, making sure that the team have what they need in order to succeed, in order to support our doctors, our clinicians, our research team. So it's, to your point, the day-to-day in IT is never the same. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you got to sometimes think outside the box and making sure that you go after other things in order to make sure that the organization is thriving.
Yeah. What would you say is kind of the biggest challenge you're facing in your role right now? And how are you and your team choosing to tackle it?
I think that I can speak for a lot of IT managers, directors, C-level executives, that the biggest challenge that IT has in general, and including myself, is budget, right? Because to your point earlier, things, something new comes up tomorrow while you just made a decision today. So you cannot just, have an infinite, amount of money to buy what you want. So making sure that you prioritize what you have today with the money that you have today to support the organization that you're working for today. Obviously, everybody likes the latest and greatest, but sometimes you need to take one step back and make sure, okay, this is going to go for a little bit longer instead of, 10 years, we're going to have something for 5 years. But the investment today has to be done in a way that the organization understands that there is a ROI involved in this. So I guess the greatest challenge is always budget.
Yeah. So the thing is that challenge is a reality, right? It's not a challenge that is really overcome in terms of just more budget, right? Like the easy solution to not enough budget is more budget. That's never going to happen. Well, I don't want to say that. Maybe it could happen. We'll pray to the IT gods, maybe. But so you still have to do something around that situation, right? Around that circumstance. So, if you can't make more money, you just make the dollars you do have go further, right? And that leads into prioritization and that ROI that you mentioned. There are other ways to determine what you choose to go after in your organization or in your philosophy. What do you find is the best way to prioritize the infinite amount of IT projects that you might have coming your way? How do you do that?
So the best way to understand, the best way to prioritize those is understand what is the immediate tasks or immediate needs of the organization, the medium needs, and the long-term needs, right? Communication, I'm very keen in communication. So once you have that communication coming from the top down, you can prioritize the immediate needs. Now, to your point, we need to stretch not only the dollars are, obviously you have to stretch those, but that also translates into resources. You need to make sure that your team has the bandwidth to do what it needs to be done. Obviously, if I have infinite amount of money, I'll hire infinite amount of people, everybody with different skill sets, and then the projects will get done. But to your point, that's not the case. So we need to make sure that the team, first of all, we need to make sure that the organization understands what's your capacity, right? What's your bandwidth from the team that you have? Given that, having communication to the top leadership saying, hey, that's your priority number one. You have a deadline of, let's say 3 months. Honestly, it's not going to happen given the resources that we have and other projects around it. So we need to make sure that open communication between executive level leadership and, the actual technicians and engineers and all of those people to make sure that they are managing expectations, I guess I would say, because expectations and communications go hand in hand. It doesn't matter if you wanted something done in a specific amount of time and the expectations, it's not true if you don't have very good communication.
It just feels like the answer to a lot of questions is just a lot of talking, a lot of communication in a very effective way, right? Not just meandering, but because the only way to know the capacity of your of your workers is to talk to them and understand exactly where they're at. In order to know what the business needs from IT, you need to communicate that, and then you need to bring that to your team and be like, hey, what do I need to bring back to that team? So it's a lot of being able. I guess you wanted to be a lawyer, so it kind of fits too. Like the need to talk, convince, clarify, it kind of all lines up. So I guess you're still using your lawyer skills even now. So I was about to ask you, do you regret, do you miss? But I guess you still get to take from it. You mentioned you moved from, and this is a really interesting about IT, is that you can move from industry to industry to industry to industry, and it's largely the same, right? Obviously, if you go into healthcare, you have to understand things like HIPAA, and there are different laws and regulations for certain industries. But by and large, you got to make sure that there's internet, you got to make sure that there's mobile, you got to make sure people can communicate, you got to make sure it never goes down, and you got to make sure it's all cyber secure, right? So those things stay relatively the same. However, you mentioned a very diverse group. I only really remember law, and I don't remember the military, but then you said nonprofit. And I feel like that might be a different experience because it's nonprofit, but it might not be. And so I just wanted to ask, what is it like doing IT in different industries? Is it noticeably different? Is it still pretty much the same?
It can vary a little bit. So you're 100% correct. I started in the legal field. I went to fintech. I worked from MSP that dealt with primary legal. I worked in higher ed and now in healthcare, nonprofit healthcare. So you're 100% correct. Most of it is the same, right? Infrastructure, servers in, endpoints and cybersecurity, everything is pretty much the same, giving a little bit of different regulations, right? Or when I was in higher ed, it's FERPA. We had to deal with colleges and universities. We started dealing with GDPR. Now, so my legal was primarily in healthcare. So I dealt with the early stages of HIPAA. Now, I guess closing the circle back into healthcare nonprofit, we're dealing again with HIPAA. We're dealing with GDPR because we have footprints in, other countries. So it is different, but you need to be aware of all of the needs from each organization. I also been in organizations that were different scales. Some of them were larger, some of them were smaller than others, but usually in the middle section. From those, it's always interesting to see that a endpoint, a computer is a computer, a server is a server. It just really depends if you have one server or if you have 35 servers. If you have a data center in AWS in the cloud, or if you have a data center in a different state altogether. So it's pretty similar, but the industry differs when it comes down to regulations. Some of the people that you talk to, budgeting is a huge deal. Procurement differs from industry to industry. So
yeah. Has it affected the way that you look at IT in the sense that you're like, oh man, I wish I did IT for this industry instead of this industry? Or by and large, is it not really that? I'll give an example of why I'm asking this or how I'm asking this. As someone who writes, it does matter, right? If I'm writing about IT or if I'm writing about B2B or if I'm writing about e-commerce, or if I'm writing about health, those are all different. And that could determine what job I choose to take because I want to write about something that is interesting to me. Is that relevant from your personal perspective in your job? Is it something like, it matters department, industry-wise, what I work for? Not really.
So initially, I thought it didn't. But if in hindsight, it did internally without me thinking about it. Because like I said, I wanted to be a lawyer. So I started off in the legal field and I worked for a few law firms. And then I went to work for an MSP, which served primary lawyers. So I was sort of on that because of my lawyering mind. However, after that, I went into higher ed and it made me look at, okay, higher ed. Now I have 3 kids. So to me, it was something like, okay, this is something that I'm impacting kids' lives, when they go to college, when they apply for things. Even though it was IT, it wasn't something that I was conscientious choosing the field or the industry that I was in. Now, once I came to nonprofit for Child Mind Institute, which is not only nonprofit, but we deal with children itself. And again, I have 3 children, 3 kids. It hits home. So it's actually rewarding when you're part of an organization or an industry that you can actually make an impact. So I guess I thought initially that it didn't matter, but it actually does. It feels good to be in an industry that does something good.
And I think that's really cool because you had said before that IT was a hobby that turned into a passion, right? And so you are already doing your passion as
Correct.
your career. To add another layer onto your passion of having like this really personal, powerful impact on top of your passion, I feel like you've now found, and I just feel like you've now found yourself in a place where it's like your love and your passion has aligned with the impact that you feel like you're giving to the world. And I think that's a really cool feeling. I don't want to speak for you, but.
Now, I just have to echo exactly what you're saying, Jethro, because it's definitely, it was a passion. It became, it was a hobby. And, the more I got into it and now with the industry. So yes, I cannot honestly complain that, what I have landed since I started in the, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. When you look at your career, what is maybe a project or, let's say that a project that you kind of are proud of that you implemented, it happened and it made impact. You mind talking about a project like that in your life?
Sure. When I first joined a previous company in higher ed, they were fairly growing, right? They had, a call center that wasn't really structured for the New England area, right? And one of my largest projects or initial projects when I joined the company was to make sure that they didn't go actually down. It was a software company. They actually didn't go down when, the northeastern, weather hits. So implementing moving everything from on-prem to the cloud, which was my first time moving something that in that large scale from on-prem to the cloud. It took a little bit longer, but it was rewarding to see because, no matter the weather, no matter where you are, kids have to go to school. Kids had to apply for colleges. And when our system was going down, it prevented some of those kids to, a year, sometimes would delay their applications for a while. So being able to implement a call center from on-prem directly to the cloud, it was rewarding to see the first time around that, we had a snowstorm, we had a blizzard, and our system didn't go down. So I can say that it was a proud moment to see a project from beginning to end and actually implemented and, fulfilling because it's still ongoing.
And I love that it just really ties into what we talked about before, that a really impactful is when you joined higher ed. Like is
Exactly.
the one that jumped into your mind. On that note, adjacent to it, we celebrate our successes, but we learn from things that didn't work as well as we planned or had hoped. Can you discuss some of your biggest learning experiences, or maybe just one or two of your learning experiences or projects that didn't go as planned, and what you learned from it, how you grew?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I can use the exact same project because
Nice.
there was definitely some hiccups. And we had to learn that sometimes timelines have to be pushed because unforeseen circumstances, right? It's one of those things that we had a specific amount of time because when you apply for college and universities, you have a specific deadline, timeline, different universities, but there's some sort of standard, sessions. So we had to implement that within that deadline. Now, again, dealing with going from on-prem to the cloud, dealing with many different vendors, they don't talk to each other. And in all honesty, everybody's in business to make money. I get it. So when we have an organization or a company that it's losing business, they don't really want to, help you out too much, even though they are required by law. So we had a few roadblocks that we had to, overcome with time. And obviously our budget was a little bit higher. So one of the lessons learned to me would be to not only on a project, give a little bit more. I mean, I usually do give a buffer, but give a little bit more of a buffer depending on the size of the project. Obviously, we always learn. We always have to make sure that communication, and part of it was the communication. Over communicating is never a bad thing, but sometimes if you leave people out of the communication is a problem. So making sure that everybody's on the same page, it's a good practice overall.
Oh, this is a question I've always wanted to ask, and I've never asked it because it's always communicate, right? That is the answer to getting things clear. But so many different people are trying to communicate with me, right? You get hundreds of emails, hundreds of Slack messages, hundreds of Zoom messages, however it is. Everyone is trying to over-clarify and over-communicate their thing so you know exactly what that team is doing. Gets to a point where I'm like, I'm taking in none of it because it's too much information, which means that there is a lack of cascading that is happening, right? To make sure that I only get the right information. And I guess that would be the end answer, but I don't even understand how to get there. So how do you, and maybe that is something it is always something that industry companies work on. How do you communicate and know that it's being received and not just being ignored because it's deprioritized compared to what everybody else is receiving?
That's a good point because 100%. When I talked about over communicating, it's never a bad thing, but it could be. It's exactly what you're saying. So I'm a soccer fan, so I use the analogy of when you're in the field, you have the captain. The captain is the only one allowed to speak with the referee. So sort of like if you have to communicate with different departments or internal clients, like I like to say, HR, finance, research, developers, you need to have a captain. You need to have a point of contact, right? Or someone that would filter in all of the information from those teams and then, bring into the powers that needs to be, or the people that need to know that information. Committees. Some committees are very needed, and sometimes you need different representatives from different departments. That's also a good way to make sure that the communication is clear to everybody. I'm 100%. I don't like meetings to set up meetings. So we also got to be careful also not to have, hey, let's have a meeting to prep for the meeting that's going to happen for the meeting. That's just too much as well. So you got to make sure that, there's a balance. And I think appointing someone to be that liaison between the departments, I think it's important.
It's making sure that we know who is receiving what information, right?
Yes.
Which is awesome. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about past experiences, present, and challenges, budget, yada, yada, yada. Moving forward, though, what are the biggest priorities or challenges, either for the business or personally for you moving forward? Some people have said trying to figure out how to implement AI into our organization. Some people are trying to figure out how to up our cybersecurity. Some people have answered with just trying to know what we have, what devices we have, and just having visibility. Some people have said digital transformation. And then for personal stuff, some people have been I just want to learn to ride a bike. Okay, no one has said that, but I don't know why that was the first one that came. My mom can't ride a bike still, so maybe that's why it came. But anyways, moving forward, big priorities, challenges, goals for you, for your organization.
Sure. Now, we have quite a few projects in the pipeline for the organization. Child Mind Institute is growing and, luckily for us, continues to grow, and we'll hope that, that continues. So we have a lot of changes coming in the next fiscal year and so forth, because this is it's a mission that, changing children's lives, right? So we always trying to make sure that we adhere to the industry standards and so forth. So we have a lot of coming up projects that that are that are in the pipeline. Challenges, again, it's always working for a nonprofit, which it is my first time working for a nonprofit. So understanding that funding and donations and things of that nature matters, so we can keep driving forward, right? So part of the projects would be to make sure that all the teams are involved in marketing communications, so they can do what they do best, which is promote and go out there and do their thing. So that's part of it. On a personal level, in all honesty, I mentioned that I have 3 kids. So it's making sure that with the world that we live in today, even though I work in IT, I grew up in IT, it's one of those things that I need to make sure and ensure that my kids are not glued to the screen 24/7. It's, getting them outside, playing with the ball, riding a bike, those kind of things, making sure that there's a balance, because anything that's a lot is too much. So you need to have a balance between, life and computers. I mean, I would love my boys to go into computers, but if that's not their passion, it's okay. As long as, video games and everything else, there's a balance of, scalability. So,
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I think it was Steve Jobs who said, I don't want my kid to have an iPhone. And I think Mark Zuckerberg or somebody said, my kid is definitely not downloading Facebook or Instagram when they're old enough. And I went, wait a minute. If the person who made it is telling us that they're not even going to give their own kid that, what are we doing giving it to our kids and children? So I think that it's again, a very interesting balance. And I think we talk about IT and we talk about tech in the context of a business, right? But IT and tech, well, I say IT and tech, I guess that's true because they're kind of merging now. IT is being asked to just be tech now for organizations, but tech is life to our lives. It's really, it's more central to our life than almost anything else. Everything we do is technology, everything, right? The fire, internet, computer, phone, everything we do is, everything we advance has a lot to do with technology. And so I think it's a very pertinent question. It's so funny that IT was considered the order taker and behind the scenes back in the day in corporate. Now it's like, wait, technology is everything. And that change is scary. With that being said, to close, Renato, any final thoughts, advice, wisdom, lessons that you've learned over your career that you kind of want to close this conversation off with today?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank you for having me over today. Making sure that people understand that IT, to your point, IT, tech, everything merges together and come together. It's important. Now, one thing that I have learned, and I try to do that within my career, is giving people a chance. At one point in time, somebody gave me a shot to become, with part of a team, to become, basically make my hobby a career. And I like to say that, I've done that as well. I have been able to give some people a chance, and they succeeded. And I was able to give some people a chance, and they saw that, this is not for me. It's okay. Both sides are okay. But I think something that I have learned is that everybody has something that drives them, whether it's professionally, personally, whatever the objectives that they have to drive them is okay. But making sure that as a leader and, part of any organization, whether it's an organization of a few people or a few 100,000 people, you need to make sure that you lead by example. And giving some people that you see a potential, give them a chance. I think it goes a long way. Today, tomorrow, you may not even know that you made an impact on somebody's lives professionally. So I guess I'll close with that.
Yeah, Renato, I just wanted to say a few things. One, thank you for coming on and sharing your time. Two, you have a really cool outlook on life. And I want the listeners to understand that. And I want you to just be reminded of that if you don't already know it. But the way you see life, I think, is very, I was going to say, I guess I'll just say beautiful. You share stories that are very easy to understand. You share points of views. And I just wanted to personally thank you for kind of reigniting that excitement of a conversation. And I think it's a good balance, using that word, of saying things that I've never heard before, but even if it is something I've heard before, stating it in such a refreshing way that it was as if I needed to hear it again. I wish you all the best moving forward, and let's keep in touch and keep talking about IT, because I believe that IT is better together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, IT is better together for sure.
We hope you enjoyed this Keeping IT Real episode, and thank you for listening. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. This podcast is all about celebrating and connecting professional heroes who work hard at IT every day. To continue the conversation and learn how VCOM can help you better buy, manage, and pay for your technology, visit us at vcomsolutions.com. Until next time.